Testing.
Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2024. We are at the Green Ladle. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll start with Councillor Harriman and go around for introductions.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Craig Charpentier, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Phoenix Welcome, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Item number 4 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personnel matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comment shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. If you can just push the button with the little face and lines.
Oh, hi, my name is Ronnie Parody and I'm Ward 6. And I came, for those of you who don't know me, I've been involved with the Lewiston school systems in the 90s. And Jake can testify to that. But anyway, so I'm old. But anyway, so I know what's going on and I've been in all the schools in Lewiston and to many of the activities. I've been on the building committees for the schools and stuff like that. So I just want to, I also still work. I work for the Lewiston School. I work for LRTC as a clinical supervisor for the nursing program. But anyway, I came tonight to support the science department at Lewiston High School. If you have not been there, please take a tour of it. It is 50 years old. We have not revised it. It was part of the new school, or Lewiston, when it was the new school in 1973. And it needs to be revised. Can you imagine having a science lab and working in a science lab that's 50 years old, and that's how much those rooms. I know it has been put in capital budget. I saw 200,000, if I remember, Scott. And everything. I think we need more. It actually needs to be revised, the whole system. So I'm asking the school board, I'm asking the superintendent and everything to please go and get some money to revise this department. Health education, I'm a nurse and I've been a nurse for over 50 years. Health education, we need the science. And the high school, not the high school, the middle school, we redid the labs back when we redid some of the middle school. Isn't that right? Yeah. So Lewiston High School, and I'm worried about gas lines. And I know there's been trouble with the gas lines related to the science department. So please, I'm asking you maybe to look at the revolving fund from the legislature. I've already talked to somebody from the legislature about it, and all you have to do is apply. And the poorer the community, the more we'll get the percentage off. So that is something to look at. $200,000 is not going to do it. We need a whole new department and everything. The other thing I just want to mention, it was brought up to me this morning, it's raining in the cafeteria at McMahon. We need that roof at McMahon this year, and that can't keep waiting anymore. It's literally, the water is pouring in. So I want to propose those things to you, and please look at it, and please look at the revolving account and go to your legislatures. I know I already talked to Peggy Rotundo and everything about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Vopelant, 5 Hilltop Avenue, Ward 7. At the beginning of the school year, Principal Radke at the high school announced that he was going to introduce an AFT program that was designed to give academic and social connections of students that certainly needed it to teachers. A couple members of the past committee voiced some concerns that if this was not enacted properly, it would be the possibility of increased truancy, habitual tardiness, possibly wandering the halls, an increase in fights. And a member myself was also concerned about the loss of academic time. Principal Radke agreed that he would, in November, would address the committee and give an update on it. We know what happened at the end of October that took the ship out of the water on that. And at the very last meeting of the old committee, I was the member that requested that Principal Radke readdress the committee and say how things were going. At our meeting with the first meeting of the new committee, Principal Radke was in attendance, and I saw on, I think it was item 4, one of the items, a data report. And I assumed, making that mistake, that it would be Principal Radke, as he was in attendance at the time, giving an update on the AFT program. Instead, we had a very good update on teacher-student ratio, the counselors' ratio, and certainly that was very valid information. I did not address that issue in public comment because I thought Principal Radke would address the AFT. So I am requesting of the committee if they could either put on the agenda or invite Principal Radke at another meeting to address and give his update. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Hello, everyone. Ron Potvin, Ward 6, former school committee member a few years back. Just want to spend some time to echo Ronnie's concerns from a couple perspectives. And one would be as a former school board member for those years and being involved in the finance committee. One thing that was always absent in the discussion, and I don't remember it at all, is anything about the science program. And there seemed to be a pretty significant lack of making it a priority. Now, I'm a little biased because now I have a new family that I'm involved in with a new girlfriend with two children who excel in science. And I sit there and I say, well, what do they have going forward to the labs in the high school? And I think the middle school's done well with their STEM lab. But, I think it's one thing I noticed is I've been helping with the maintenance of the science labs for the past 20 years. And I've not seen anything change there and only get older. And it really is in the need of a pretty major overhaul. And I think if you just take a look at the curriculum, to where it's going, science is going to be a big part. That would maybe, I'm not sure on the timing. Jake, I think CIP's already signed, sealed, and delivered, but if there's any room to take another look and, maybe put more attention on it. I echo what Ronnie says and a few parents that have mentioned their concerns about that. So I just want to echo and hope that there's further support for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 5 to receive the multilingual funds clarification, added position due to numbers, and request for cultural brokers. A long one.
So it's a long title. I did share a packet with you. I passed it out as it came together, and Liza McElmore is here. She's our director. But in part, we had mentioned a while back that the state had issued some additional funds due to additional enrollments, specifically around multilingual learners. And so Liza's here as the director of our multilingual department and wants to share some ideas that she has. We've looked at these in-house now for a while. And once we had figured, I don't know if you remember one of my updates, I said that there was $600,000+ that was allocated to Lewiston. That money is for immediate use. And that is, again, because of the enrollment uptick. This would be requesting to use those funds in this way. And Liza will walk us through some of the ideas, but things that we know we need because of student teacher ratios. And also we've talked for a long time about having more of a cultural brokerage-like position. This would allow, with your approval for multiple. The reason this is before you is it's unique in that we're asking for unbudgeted positions, but with money that we didn't know we were going to have. So it is budgeted because of the adjustment, but not part of the budget. The state is intending for us to spend these funds in the current year to support the students and the influx of enrollment that we've had. We've also asked about ongoing funds. And because this counts in our enrollments, these funds, maybe not to 100%, but these funds will continue to be part of our funding formula. So adding these now would not be a big pickup later. So this rarely happens that we get money that they want us to spend now to support student enrollment fluctuations, but that's what this is. I'm sure there's gonna be lots of questions and I'll answer those as we go. But I want to give Liza a chance to walk us through that document that we passed out. And I guess she can answer any questions you have also.
Sure. So the first item on the list is requesting 2 language facilitator and community specialist positions. This, in very simple terms, is a cultural broker. We currently have 6 language facilitators across the district that are specific to the Somali language. Their basic role is to serve as an interpreter and do some cultural connection, but adding the community specialist piece would really enhance the cultural brokerage piece. This would be a year-round position. And really, we want to target some of the languages and cultures that we're lacking. If you look on the 3rd page in I think it's the 3rd page in the printed packet, there's the language breakdown. These numbers have changed dramatically over the past year. We've known that Portuguese is a growing language need over the past few years, but it's grown exponentially in the past year. You can see that it's only a couple hundred less students under Somali. And this is something that we're really proud of. We have 36 different home languages represented across Lewiston Public Schools. We do everything we can to provide language access, but for our less common languages, that usually comes in the form of interpreters over the telephone. If we can get a video interpreter, that's even better. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, some of our growing languages, such as Swahili and Lingala, I've sat on language line for about 20 minutes waiting to get connected with an interpreter, and that's not fair to our families, and that's not fair to our staff.
Just as a quick note, so the language line it's a service that we pay for, that we use. We have a code so we can call up, and we say what we need, what school we're calling from, or what office we're calling from, and they try to find us an interpreter, and this is all done over the phone. So they can then call the other party and act as an interpreter for that communication.
And it is an incredible resource. It's something we have available and that we've used for many years. But ultimately, as our population continues to diversify, we want to better serve our parents, our families, and our students. And so these language facilitator and community specialist positions would target those languages, Portuguese, French, Swahili, Lingala, Kinyarwanda, and help us have somebody on staff year-round. We're hoping that this will help reduce the necessary use of language line by being able to use a Lewiston Public Schools employee. We know that that's not going to replace that service entirely, but we're hoping that that would be the case and help us really bridge the connection between the school department and the growing communities. Do you want me to pause for questions after each item, or do you want me to just keep going?
Questions at this point? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Do you have people already, excuse me, kind of who are familiar with this sort of position, who you're looking to hire? Or is this going to be posted and we're kind of praying that somebody reaches out?
We would definitely post it and go through the process. But in a lot of recent conversations, I do think that there are folks within our community that would be very interested in a position like this and highly qualified for that.
Member Eames?
Yeah, my question was about qualifications, like when we're dealing with federal money or state money, that becomes an issue. So is it going to be a roadblock or are we okay?
I don't believe it will be a roadblock.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So this kind of piggybacks off what Member Bowden said, but I remember a couple meetings ago, I came to the committee and said, we have a posting for a Portuguese interpreter and that hasn't been filled yet, and it had been open for a very long time. So I know you say that you're hopeful and you're confident. And I love that you're excited and hopeful for it, but realistically, what are we looking at that these positions are going to be filled? I mean, if that position sat open for as long as it did, and has it been filled yet?
It has.
Okay, so
Yeah, I was gonna say a couple of things it has, but also these positions are a little more robust in that they're year round. And so this will help with the summer challenges that we've had. So we think that might attract applicants. So
Member Harriman and then Member Gallant, sorry.
I was just wondering how much the language line costs, and do we pay for it by the minute, or do we have a subscription or something like that?
So we pay by the minute. And so I'd have to look and get exact numbers for you, but I can tell you our bills are quite extensive. We pay every month and it's used district-wide. So quite large. They also offer a video service. So the phone is a little bit less expensive than the video, but video is preferred because you see a person that can interpret for you.
So I understand that $600,000 is what the federal will give us. And is that for 1 year?
So it's through the state funding formula, and it's over 600,000, and they're including it in the funding formula for subsidy. So The ED 279, which we'll be working with here shortly in the budget process, has formulaic percentages. So how much money goes to for which student in the subsidy formula. So what they did just now is say that additional funding will go to Lewiston as part of the funding formula. So it's not a one-time Band-Aid. It's going to increase the funding.
Okay.
So it should continue.
I mean, the possibility is that we get funded for a while and then that gets taken away.
Yeah, and that's always an area of concern of mine. Or sometimes we have a grant, so it's like you can do a thing, but then when the grant stops, what are you going to do? So this is a shift in that strategy, and that it's going into the funding formula.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So this says, we have 6 language facilitators in our district. Is that what that number is saying?
Yes.
So my other question is kind of, does that mean that, and I don't really know how to word this, does this mean that these are specific 6, that's all that they, not that that's all that they do, but that's their position, like that's what they do? Because I know just being in the schools, we have other staff who will translate or come into classrooms or work with a parent if they're there, like, you know, they pull or maybe they work in MLL and their services are needed at some time, so they're pulled in a different direction. So I guess what I'm asking is 6 the true number of language facility of like people that are interpreting thank you, that word. I can't talk today in our school. You know, I'm just looking for like a bigger picture here. I mean, this looks awful. You look like you have, you know what I mean, 81 kids, 81.5. You know what I mean? Like that looks awful. And I know that on paper that's what it is, but sometimes there's probably a little gray area in there, right? Is what I'm guessing. Like
Sure.
we have some staff who maybe kind of float, or if services are needed, they're like, hey, I'm free, I can pop in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I understand your question. So we have a lot of bilingual staff members, and I think that's what you're getting at. And that's something that we're really proud of, and we think being bilingual is an asset. However, in order to be a qualified interpreter or a language facilitator, you have to prove that you're qualified and competent to interpret in the native language as well as English. We have language assessments that we require our language facilitators to participate in, as well as ongoing professional development. And so a lot of times they're not necessarily working directly with students. I mean, there are certainly times where they're not in meetings or something else, and we want them present and being visible in the school. So there may be times, but their responsibility isn't to necessarily work directly with students on teaching and learning specifics. The majority of their work has to do with connecting with families and the community and the school. And so there are truly 6 Somali and 1 Portuguese, so 7 total. But there are a lot of bilingual staff members. You're welcome.
I have a couple questions. Are there any people with the title cultural broker in our district right now?
Not with the title cultural broker. The reason we were able to hire the Portuguese language facilitator is because we were able to shift the responsibilities to have this job title currently. So our 1 Portuguese language facilitator takes on the additional pieces of that cultural broker piece. We also have a community relations and language access coordinator who has some responsibilities of being a cultural broker for the Somali community. But other than that, we do not.
And for the 2 that are being proposed, are you looking for any specific language or multiple languages or?
I would look to target more Portuguese, French, Lingala, and Kinyarwanda. Of course, it would be wonderful to find somebody who could speak all of those languages. However, a lot of recent arrivals into the Lewiston community, they do speak multiple languages. So we're hoping that we may be able to find somebody with that skill set. But we'd want to target those languages specifically.
Thank you. Member Bowden?
Thank you. So $90,000 per position. Is that including benefits or is it
Yes.
90 plus benefits?
Yes, that is salary, benefits, all of the above.
So what would the salary actually be like if we take out like the benefit piece of it? Because I know like a teacher salary, the minimum is 40,000 a year. So what would this position?
Around 55, 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
there'll be a range based on,
Okay.
that's what that number comes from.
Any other questions? Okay, I think you can move on.
Okay. The next request is for additional ESOL or ELL or ML teachers. The state is shifting to ESOL when talking about teachers, but multilingual or ML when we're talking about the program as a whole. And so ultimately, this is to accommodate the very rapidly growing student population. I pulled some numbers just to give you an idea of the growth that we've experienced. Since the summer, we have 426 new multilingual learners in Lewiston. However, that does include kindergarten and pre-K. But even if we remove them, we still have 292 students, and that doesn't include the students that we registered today at the multilingual office. So we anticipate that enrollments will continue. We expect there to be more families resettled in the community. I can't give you a specific number. We have an idea of individuals, but we don't know if they're school-aged individuals. They could all be adults. And so it's one of those things that we don't really have an exact pulse on.
With this, but as a bit of a side, the projected numbers for those who have received a pledge essentially from resettlement. So Catholic Charities, MERS, there's a number of organizations that this is part of what they do is they help resettle folks. They help them find housing and get things moving. Their allotments for 24 were doubled from 23, or most of them were doubled. And so, and by doubled, I mean, I think it went from somewhere in the 300 or 400 range to the 700-800 range. Now, to Laz's point, that may mean there's no housing and they can't find anywhere to put them. They don't have to land in Lewiston. These organizations can help folks get on their feet anywhere in Maine, but they do have an allotment. So with double the allotment is something that I constantly think about. But the other thing I constantly think about, which is a little further down the road, is all of these new building projects, which may not be done by the start of school next year, but a big one will be the year after. And how those apartments will be separated up for mixed use, and how many students might land there who are new to our community is all part of the matrix of what we are continuing to think about as it relates to space, because our buildings are full.
If you look on the very last page of the handout, it's the staff to student breakdown, and this is specifically ML staff, ML teachers, ESOL teachers to ML student breakdown. We really try to keep our ratio underneath 30 so that we can make sure that we're providing the legally required service that multilingual learners have to receive. When we go above that, our group sizes, our class sizes get quite large, and we will continue to provide them service, even if that means we need, 25 students, 30 students in a classroom, but it's not ideal for the students and it's not ideal for the staff. And so these three teaching positions would help offset some of those growing numbers at some of the schools whose ratios are tipping over 30.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. Do we have any current open MLL or do we have any open positions right now in our district?
We have one instructional coach that's open, but I am very proud to say that all of our teaching positions are filled.
Okay. And turnover, do you find that there's a lot of turnover with these positions? Are we keeping like the same teachers year after year? do you see a trend? Like, what do you see going on with that?
I would say it's pretty comparable district-wide, if not slightly better. We were seeing a lot of turnover during COVID and immediately post-COVID. But we had minimal turnover last year, and we added positions over the past few years. A lot of our teaching positions that were vacant stemmed from the first year that we entered the Department of Justice agreement, because we added 13 teachers, and ESOL is not a field that is super popular across the state. And so there's not a lot of folks who were looking for those roles, but we've done a ton of outreach and recruitment, and I feel like we would be able to fill these.
So, sorry, I just have one more question. If we don't fill the positions, this is like across the board. Like, if we don't fill these positions and they don't get filled and they just kind of sit empty, what's our plan B for that money? Like, where are we planning to put that?
So that will end up in fund balance, and that's that money we talk about in the revenue sheet when we do the budget process for as kind of seed money for next year. So we use that to start the next budget. That's also dangerous, because if we use too much and you don't have it some year, you have a problem, you have a shortage. And so I'm very mindful of that, but that's what that fund balance comes from. It's those unfilled positions, or sometimes the committee will approve things like the camera and the sensor project. So some of those unfilled positions, once you give me that directive, I go and I take money from some of those places at times to do the other things that. So for example, a position that's been unfilled, say, all year, we know that that money is safe to use and reallocate as directed by the school committee. And so sometimes we do things like that. I always bring those things to you because you're shifting what the intent was of that. And I make sure that there's a vote on it.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. So is there, I mean, obviously the positions are for people who are multilingual, that's very valuable. Are there degrees that are required for this? And I'm just trying to wrap my head around this position where you said that they don't actually do instructional teaching with students. I can't wrap my head around paying them more than a teacher showing up to our district that's gonna teach an entire classroom of kids. So I'm having.
Are you referring to the cultural broker position? So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm still like in my head, I'm still stuck on this because it just seems like a high starting pay for someone who isn't actually doing instructional, like learning with children. And I understand it's a year-round position. I understand that. But it just, I guess I'm just looking for a little more of an explanation on why.
I mean, realistically, that is the explanation, just that it's year round. If we pay less than that, we won't be able to hire anyone because it's too easy to make much more than that year round. So I guess that's where I land. The teachers have a 182-day contract. So, from June when we get out through August, those are hours that these folks would be asked to work. So, and the vacations and whatnot too, they still have work.
Member Eames?
First question, so the money comes from the formula that has to do with our ML population. So the money going into the fund balance, wouldn't it have to still be used for ML purposes or no?
Nope. So the subsidy is developed using that formula. Once we receive it, we use it to take care of our approved budget. So it doesn't always match one for one. Certainly that's the intent as much as possible. And as you know, every penny we ask for locally is us exceeding the state subsidy. So we'll use those funds for that purpose. But once if they become fund balance, they become the local discretion as to how they'll be allocated moving forward.
Thank you.
To an extent. If we ever go under that threshold, the rules change. But we're not a minimum receiver. So.
Okay, that's disturbing, but okay. And now I've lost my other yes, my other question was, here you have on the final page, we have a list of ratios, students to teachers, but I don't think all students are full-time ML, is that right? So how are these counted?
Yes, so all students who are identified as ML would be considered full-time ML. What their service looks like depends on their age level. So just to give you a general idea, at the elementary level, students, again, depending on their proficiency level, are pulled out either once or twice per day. And so that fills up a teacher's day pretty quickly because of some of the parameters from the Department of Justice agreement, but also for what we know to be effective ESOL instruction. Middle and high school, it's part of their scheduled periods.
Member McLaughlin? I forgot your name for a second, sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a long one. Two quick questions. So just from that earlier point from member Eames, since this is not using the full balance of what the state has added, right? So is the remainder just going into the school's fund balance, or does that have a different plan?
So we'll receive it as subsidy throughout the rest of the year. While we don't have it allocated to ask in this, we don't know who we might hire, what might be there, and I always like to budget under when
Yeah.
possible.
Okay.
But yeah, there is more funding there's more funding coming in subsidy than allocated for this request.
And what you were saying is it could be used for anything. Is that, maybe we might not want it to be, but that there's no legal requirement that is tied to this use. Is that what you were saying previously?
So I would say that there's not a black and white line from
Okay.
what subsidy comes in that matches how it gets expended.
Okay.
It's really about a formula about who gets what as a district or as a school unit. And then we do have to defend it, though. Actually, we reviewed a document today talking about how we provide the auditors. It's like an equity statement of how we are equitably using the funds we receive to meet the needs of kids within those margins of what it's slated for.
Yeah.
And we do that by far.
Okay.
So
No, I
we're-
think this is a good use of it, but just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure they understood
Sure.
how that works. But just my other question was, could you just clarify for me? So of these 5 positions, how many of them need to be certified as a classroom teacher?
So the 3 ESOL
Just those
teachers have to hold a specific certification to teach English as a second language. The cultural brokers do not have a specific teaching certification, but they would still need to go through the fingerprinting background check, just like
Right.
our other non-teaching staff.
Okay, thank you.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So yes, I think that we have a big need in our district, for MLL and, definitely I think a lot, our students and our staff would actually benefit greatly of having like a go-between between the school and the home life, because I think sometimes things get lost and there is a struggle there. My only concern is, I mean, we had a couple people from the public today talk about a cafeteria that's reigning in, where you have a science program that's 50 years old. And I understand like this is a large number of our students that do need these services. We have to think about all of our children as a whole and as a whole district, like what would be most beneficial. And I think we have a lot of open teacher positions now that we can't fill. We have large classroom numbers at schools where they're at capacity. So not that I'm saying I don't think this is a good idea. I think there are good points to it, but I would also maybe like to look at like as a whole, what are some other things that we could do with that money that would also benefit our students, whether that's paying teachers a smidge more so that we can keep teachers in our district, or updating the science lab, or fixing leaky roofs, or I mean, the list could go on. There's a billion things that we could probably spend that money on. Would we be okay if we had could we compromise and say, okay, we'll do like 1 or 2 or 3 positions instead of 5? Like, is there a way so everybody kind of gets what they need, and then all of our students are serviced in some sort of way?
So a couple of things. I was going to wait for my update to share some pieces, but from a science lab perspective, that has been a multi-year conversation. The last school committee approved $200,000 request in LCIP, which still has to go through a process. We won't know till the spring until that, if that money is there. There's other ways we can look at renovating funds. If you recall, those of you who were here, we applied for renovating funds grant last year for the cameras and the access points, because their theme was safety last year. We did not get that grant. It went to a number of other schools, but they think that we might be a good candidate this year. It's to be seen, but we apply for those grant funds annually. The McMahon roof that's leaking, that's already budgeted. We've already had contractors out to walk the space to look at it. And so there's repairs that are already in the works. We've had some funky weather, which hasn't helped when we have, hurricanes in December, or almost hurricanes, but so that's already happening. I guess from a kind of to go back to what Member Eames was saying and what Member McLaughlin asked about, would somebody show up and say you can't spend that money that way, the way it's built into subsidy? I don't think that they would. But it doesn't feel ethical to take money that's being allocated for our enrollment changes to do other projects. So I would support this as Liza has proposed. She did a lot of research on that. But I still think those other things need to be done as well. And as far as our hiring perspective goes, we're getting healthier and healthier with our teacher numbers. So hopefully that continues to improve.
Looking at the student to teacher ratios on the last page, like LHS is 40 students to one teacher. We got 31 students to one teacher at Connors. Are there any I know there's like state ratios for traditional classroom settings. Are there ratios that apply to this population as well?
There are not. There's no legal ratio. 30 is kind of the number that we've identified internally that is feasible as far as class size go. If we went a little over, like we are now, for example, we make it work. We have no other choice. We're legally obligated to provide the service. But what that means is, an ML teacher might pull a group of 12 students in half a classroom, leaving 5 in the gen ed classroom. And if we think about equity, that's hard to see. However, we do what we can. Our staff is incredible and they're committed to doing whatever to make it work. But there is no legal number. I will say a little caveat to the LHS numbers, that does include Lewiston Academy students. And so that increases that ratio slightly. One of the teachers is compensated through the Lewiston Academy budget. They stay after school. So while those students are included in that number because of case management responsibilities, they're not seen during the traditional 8-period school day. Yeah.
And we've had a lot of conversations for a long time, but specifically recently about having large classroom sizes and how we're sacrificing education for our students. These numbers are, I hear that you're saying that you guys get it done and you find a way, but we're really sacrificing quality education for our students at this point at 40 per one teacher, right? I mean, is that safe to say?
Yes, but also know that 40 students are not in one classroom at a time. That's just
right.
Kind of the breakdown ratio. If you
But
were
a
to
teacher is an individual person presumably is juggling 40 students, the case of 40 students, a caseload of 40.
if not larger, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Any further questions?
So yeah, anything like this, which by the way, just for members joining the committee, this is not typical. It's not typical that we get subsidy allocations like this. It's definitely not typical for me to show up and say, hey, we want 5 new positions. It's because it was allocated and because it should be continuing that we wanted to devise a good plan and bring it to you. So, but yes, if you want us to go get more information, we can certainly do that. But my hope would be that, or my recommendation would be to approve these positions and let Liza and her team move forward with acquiring best people we can find.
The agenda doesn't specify a vote. It says no motion required. It wasn't written as to receive and vote. It was just to receive. Just for procedural. we can still, somebody could still make a motion, yes. It's just not written the way it normally is written when there is a
I
vote.
do try to add with potential vote on those.
May I?
Yes, member
So-
Eames.
I would like to make a motion to approve this allocation of state funding that was deliberately allocated to us for this purpose. It seems like the right use of of 3/4 of the funds. There's still 114,000 left loose. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Member McLaughlin?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Did you want to discuss? You seem like you want to say something.
Well, I mean, there's a motion and a second on the table, so I just think it's, so I had raised my hand before, but then didn't speak because, Member Hurd actually articulated what I was going to ask, which was, could we maybe cut these positions like to, instead of 2, can we do 1? Instead of 3, can we do 2? And see if we can fill them and see the effectiveness of it and see, you know, how it's working and sort of get an update. And, you know, is there still a need to add 1 more to each position? Is that something we could add further in to the budget later on? I don't know. I was just listening to the same thing. I literally was going to say the same thing as Megan, which was, you know, I just heard 2 audience members come up and say that there are like needs in our district and this is a need also. And so, and you explained it, I understand. But I just wonder, if we could kind of do half of this for now and then revisit it and see if it's working and then add on the additional staff, but now the motion and second is out there, so I just wanted to say my piece, that's all.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. We'll open up to the public if any members of the public would like to discuss. Thank you.
I just want to mention about the Ronnie Parity, Ward 6. I just want to mention about the language line. I worked as a public health nurse for over 10 years in the city, Lewiston and Auburn. And I use the language line all the time. The staff have to be trained how to use it. It's not that easy to use, believe me. And I was doing medical stuff over the language line, so you can imagine. And I was doing different languages. We always had interpreters for Somali, but we never had interpreters for Portuguese. And when the other Angola and those people came along, we had to use the language line a lot more. And we were in the homes using the language line, so it's not easy to use, okay? It's just like you have to know how to use an interpreter correctly, and the interpreters have to be certified in the language, even the educational language, if you're talking about education, okay? Because I know medically, they had to be certified medically interpreters to work with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Hello, I am Jay Rich. I am a multilingual teacher at McMahon. First of all, I want to say it's the best job ever. So anybody looking for an ML position would love to see you here. I just want to reiterate my support for the plan that Director McLemore put before you, especially since what Jake said that the allocation numbers are doubled since last year. So we know we're going to get some more students. Over the summer, Lysa said that we had an additional 426 ML students. Keeping those class sizes small is critical. They're learning a new language. Some kids are, you know, faced with traumas getting here too. So I would be in full support of the additional ML teachers and as well as the cultural brokers. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, all in favor? And opposed? 8-1. All right, I counted that right. 8-1, it passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is to receive and potentially vote on the March Exchange Day recommendation to switch it to a school day.
So this is before you for a couple of reasons. One of them being by contract, we have to notify folks by I think the 31st of January. So that's the timing of this. We've obviously missed some school days. And so the date in March is, it's slated as an exchange day. What that is it's a day that teachers don't have to report for work, and it's in exchange for the evenings they work to do parent-teacher conferences. So it's a calendar date. What we did last year is move that calendar date to the end of the school year and have school that day so that we're not pushing further and further into June whenever possible to extend the school year. So that's the piece that's brought to you. And if you approve, we will send out notifications so that people can plan accordingly to have school on that day. And if you choose not to, it'll remain an exchange day.
We did this last school year, didn't we?
Yes.
But not in March. Was it March?
Yep.
It was March.
Was,
okay.
yep.
Member Heard.
It's a verbal thing today. It's going around. Did we apply for our waivers yet?
So we're waiting to see what the weather does to us. But we have, the last school committee approved submitting for a waiver for the days that we missed following October 25th. And so we're looking at the weather. Part of some of the feedback from the state and others around some waivers that were denied was because we need more time in the year to see what the impacts from weather and whatnot are. So that was the intent of holding off.
Any other questions or comments about the March Exchange Day? Is there a motion? Oh, is there any members of the public that would like to speak about the March Exchange Day? Seeing none, back to the committee. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the March Exchange Day recommendation? Member Medina?
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the March Exchange Day.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Agenda item number 7, to receive and discuss early release for inclement weather.
So I don't know if I was people's best friend or worst enemy last week when we had some weather in the afternoon. There's no shortage of angst around weather for a superintendent anyway. It's on my phone, it's on my laptop. When there's weather, it's on a screen next to me in my office. One of the things that we don't have in policy currently, and the reason I shared this as to discuss early release for inclement weather and to not have a vote tonight is twofold. One, I think it should go through the policy subcommittee, but also I think public may want to weigh in on this. We had early release many years ago. There was a day in which I've been told, I don't know personally, but that a student was left and could not get access to get into the house during a pretty stormy afternoon. And the school committee at the time said, we're done with this. We're not doing this anymore. I think between COVID, communication, and many other things, that an early release day, if needed, could be a good tool to use, should it be needed. Having said that, it's not within the policy. So when we did it after the storm, I think it was December 18th, we did that for emergency purposes. Roads were being blocked, wires were down, schools had no power, that kind of thing. So that was a decision that was made that we carried out, but we don't just have it as a standing possibility. The only caveat that does sit in place, the prior committee approved that we could do it if we notified families the night before. And storms don't always work that way. And I know that the most recent one did not. It was pretty slick out there was when we sent people home. But we would like to have this as a tool. I think it could be beneficial. All the area schools still do it. And again, I think a lot has changed in the world of communication as far as us being able to reach parents and families. But it would need to go through a school committee process. And I'm hopeful that this is just the start of that, but I also wanted to see what the pulse was of the committee before we write policy and try to bring it back.
Any member Bowden?
So just to be clear, you're not looking for a vote from us tonight. You're looking for us to say, yeah, go ahead and send it to policy.
Mostly looking for some direction and also to get a pulse, because if 7 of you say there's no chance we're approving that, I don't want to chase it.
No, so I
But
personally am fine with early release. I think that last week during that day where it started snowing at noon, and I think I even texted you that day because I went out driving and almost, yeah, Montello, I was going down Montello Hill and I had to pull off onto a side road and take a different way around because I was like not able to brake. So that scared me. Just the idea of a bus full of children going down Montello Hill in that weather. And I have a brand new SUV with brand new tires on it and I couldn't do it. So that frightened me a little bit. So I am 100% in agreement that we should have early release for days like that, because you just never know with Maine weather. I mean, yeah, so I agree. I think it should go to policy.
Member Galant?
I continue to be concerned about notification. I can foresee somebody not having the ability either to understand the process or understand what's going on, or not have, a cell phone or a way to get a hold of somebody. So I continue to be cautious about that. Thank you.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So I do hear what you're saying, Member Glant, but the amount of phone calls and text messages and emails that I receive from you, I don't feel like obviously there's a way that something could fall through the cracks. But my husband was out in Texas last week and he was like, how do I unenroll from this so he doesn't wake me up in a time change? Like, how do I do this? So I think there's enough out there that, and I think a lot of, our admins at, a building level are really good. I know Charlotte sends out talking points constantly. So, if you, for some reason, don't get a phone or a call or an email or a text, there's also talking points. I am a little concerned about children being left if no one's there. So I don't know where where our responsibility falls with that. Like, if you're going to go swim in a tank of sharks, they make you sign a waiver. So there's no liability. Like, I don't know if there's a way to take liability off from us as a district if God forbid something like that happened. Not that we wouldn't be liable, but you know what I mean? Like, how do we protect ourselves in a case if God forbid something like that happened?
So in part, our littles, when they're dropped, are supposed to be our contractor make sure that an adult receives them. And we had a situation not too long ago, which helped us make sure that was an I that was dotted and a T that was crossed. So that should be happening with our littles. The older kids, I think that they figure out things, but I don't think people are worried about high school kids in this conversation. It's that first grader, right? That can't get in the house and we think they can, and where are they? And so as long as they're being received by adults, which the drivers are looking for, and we also have scenarios in which kids, there's no one there to receive them and the bus will bring them back to the school. And then administrators work to either bring them in a van or keep trying other contacts to see who's where. But I do think the piece for families that they have to be thoughtful of is if this becomes a thing, we'll have to message it out because people will have to be prepared for that. Because you may not know, on this date, they go to Graham's house and, making sure everybody's in the loop. So I think communication is a big piece. And again, I apologize for the number of emails and texts. And if it makes you feel any better, it's even worse for me because I generate the message and then I get it as a staff and I get it as a parent. And so I make the message and then receive it twice every time.
Good morning. Good morning. Good
Yeah.
morning. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Does this change anything for like our teacher contracts? Like, does an early release affect their contract or how they stay or anything like that?
So it doesn't, teachers still have their work day and typically we try to be understanding of the conditions where we can. Where it does matter is that it counts as a day. And so if we go to school and students get released, as long as we've gotten to about lunchtime, it counts as a school day. So it's not a day you have to make up, which teachers are usually in favor of. Not that they don't want to be with the kids, but again, you get into those hot days in June and it's that day that you're like, if we had an early release, we would have 3 less days of, 90 degrees in my classroom. So
The announcements for snow days or early release or late start, do those go out in multiple languages?
yes, we're using the tools that we have. And so this is why they go out the way they do, and also into some places that you may not see because they are translated. And then the tools that we're using on the user end interface, they can pick the language. And we vet those tools. So like talking points will actually come through in the language that parents have chosen as their preference.
So like
And
your
it's
morning,
vetted to be accurate.
your morning message, which is actually in your voice, how is that received from people who don't speak English in our community?
Well, it's just as my voice.
Okay,
But
that
it's
doesn't get
also-
interpreted like through the text message that
So-
follows, or?
It can through the text, also the email, there's tools for that. And then the web page, that does it behind the scenes, as we do it.
Okay, so in theory, families in our community that don't speak English would be notified that your kid's coming home early today?
Yes.
Remember,
And that's in to that end though. So when I'm doing bus calls in the morning, it's a little different. But if we were sending kids home, we would ask people to use talking points as well. So parents might get bombarded, but again, that's to be on the safe side.
Member Medina?
Yeah, and just wanted to add that there are also like people that I know that have group chats in like WhatsApp, and they say, hey, there's no school today in their language, and it gets delivered to a bunch of people, and then it's kind of word of mouth from there. So I just wanted to let you know that that is the thing. So it's helpful.
Thank you. Member Eames?
It just takes one though. It just takes one disaster as whatever decades ago that must have happened. So I'm just want to say that I'm not for this because it just takes one. And because I was a full-time professional woman with a solo parent, and that's really hard. So I'm not for it.
A few years ago, if it's any consolation, when my daughter was at the high school, she chose to stay after school late and didn't let us know. And so she wasn't home to get my son off the bus. And the bus driver realized there was no one home and brought him back to the school. And then we got the phone call. So there are some safeties in place for that, but I'm sure it's not foolproof, right? Yes. Member McLaughlin, why is it so hard to say your name?
Yeah, two questions. So one, we are unusual as a district that does not have an early release policy, right? So we're not totally out on a limb, but well, we're more out on a limb now, I guess is the other way to put it. But then the other question is, so you do have the authority to do an early release in emergency situations currently, right? So this would just be making a more regular policy of that? Is that complicated or?
I would say that the school committee has entrusted me to make those very difficult decisions when they occur. We've done that once, and it was that very bad storm in December when we were losing power and trees and stuff. So I have the authority, but I also have the liability and the heavy backpack part of it. But to your point, yes, all the districts around us. So when we talk as superintendents about a storm, I have to look at it differently because we don't have early release.
Yeah.
And so this last storm, I think there were 3, if not 4 schools in our immediate area that I knew they were going to have early release the night before. And it wasn't really a tool that I felt like I could use in that particular storm. And certainly got worse in the afternoon. So it'd been nice to have that tool. We would give people a heads up. We're not going to say, your kids are leaving in 10 minutes. We'd have to pick a time because schools would have to make sure kids get lunches. We have to mobilize 70+ drivers to make sure that, buses are rolling, and we have to figure out a timing sequence in our schedule to do that dismissal. So I'd want some lead time to make sure that we do that well.
Member Glant?
Yeah, the difference between early release and a snow day, or, canceling school for the day. I mean, if things are pretty bad in the morning, is there really a difference between 11 o'clock and 7 o'clock?
I think it's a good question. I think it's rare. And what happened for us here recently was we were supposed to get 1 to 3 inches and we ended up with 5, 6. And that kind of burst of snow that was supposed to come around 1 and last an hour lasted 4. And so I think it'd be tricky. It would be like me looking at radar saying, geez, this is looking like it's going to get worse. And we get updates from the weather service. It's not always perfect. I would be hesitant to use an early release because I think the disruption is trickier than most other situations. But it would be good to have the tool. I do think, again, hindsight, I probably would have used it last week if that was something that we had in our toolbox. And it counts as a school day. Timing of these storms is critical, whether it's morning or afternoon.
Counselor Harriman?
Thank you. Just wanted to say that I'm generally in favor of this, as long as we have, solid policies in place, as Member Eames was mentioning, to make sure that people don't get left outside. And I think it's especially beneficial because it does count as a school day and we don't have to do those makeup days.
I guess, I don't know if public has anything, but I will get it to the policy subcommittee. It shouldn't be hard to draft.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? Yes.
Paul Beauplant, Ward 7, Hilltop Avenue. Take me longer to get here than to ask my question. Can our subcontractor Hudson Bus accommodate us for that?
Yes, they can, but it does involve some lead time, so I'd have to be making decisions. And again, schools would have to be able to make sure everybody gets a lunch and has everybody prepared for dismissal and all those things. So it would take us, even if this were approved, we're going to have a plan around what that looks like with some timeframes.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So currently we have, all of our schools do not dismiss at the same time. So for an early dismissal, would all of our schools dismiss at the same time? Would we do like different dismissals? How would that work?
So we would establish times for each school, and it would align to our busing schedule. I think it could be a routine that people would just become familiar with, but that first time, if we need it, would need some messaging around what time. And that would come from the school. I could do a broader message that we're doing it, but I also want to say out loud that any parent could pick up their student at any time and take them and just say, hey, look, the roads are bad. I'm on my way through. I need to dismiss my child. That's always fine.
Is there a general consensus that another member of the public would like to speak?
Ron Potvin, Ward 6. Again, there's something new to me, being on the other end, with two kids, and I am the one transporting in the morning and the afternoon. And I'm getting the notifications, and the two things I'm running into is it happens quick. We already have plans lined up, and then all of a sudden there's a shift. If we do this early release, that I think that whatever you can do in terms of as much advance notice, because, like in my job, I can do things, but I need to be able to finish what I'm in the middle of. And the other side of it, if there's a buffer, whether there's assigned employees or something that, let's say I can't get there at a certain time, but I'm going to be a half hour, to be able to have like an hour buffer that, somebody will be there. To be able to, a window, shall we say, as opposed to saying 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, whatever, but be a window. That would be a little more convenient to try to fit in. So that's just been my experience so far. So it's been fun. So hopefully we don't have to go through it too often. So.
Can you turn the button off, Ron?
The button. How do I forget this?
Thank you.
Just one.
Member McLaughlin?
Yeah, just a quick question. Have we had any feedback from Hudson or from any bus drivers about, would they feel safer with an early release policy?
Let's go with yes.
Okay. Well, we can ask them maybe.
I observed some feedback online that
Yeah.
did not seem like they really wanted to be driving in the snow at all.
Yeah.
So is there sort of a general consensus that we want to pursue it? Okay, all right. Agenda item number 8 is to discuss January 27th or another day for a retreat.
Yeah, so I've been talking with Chair Parks about this. There was at least one member that couldn't make it on the weekend of the 27th. So I thought about, what about a Monday? And again, this would be just for a retreat. This is mostly just kind of a state of the schools, if you will, just to provide you an opportunity to hear some of the things that we've got going and some things that are upcoming. It wouldn't be a business meeting with votes. It would just be a retreat and so walking through some things. But I'd like very much for everyone to be able to make it so that if you have questions or whatnot, it's helpful that if everybody could be there together, it'd be good. So I want to pitch the 27th, but I've already heard that some can't make that, and I would like to avoid it. So what about next Monday night? Yeah, or I can even,
He's not back yet.
oh, so never mind, I'm gonna, what? Okay. Why don't, if it's okay with the group, I'll send an email with a few options, and if you could let me know what you can make, and then we'll call a retreat and we'll put it out there that we're having one. I'd like to do it sooner than later, though, is there's a lot of stuff coming, I guess, that's in my head that I want to make sure you're all aware of. So I'll send some dates and some times.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Agenda item number 9 is to review procedural rules.
So pretty straightforward. Procedural rules are established by the committee, and this is essentially what you agree to run things by, along with Robert's rules, which is a standard practice, the charter, state law, all of those things.
Charter is missing from that.
Um,
In our procedural rules, it used to say Robert's rules, da, 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 and the charter, and it just says state law, DOE, Robert's rules. The charter language is missing. There were a few other edits I noticed too.
Okay. Are there substantive things that people felt like they fundamentally wanted to have a discussion about? I don't think we should do this way or that way. Because if it's just small edits, we could review them, and you could adopt it in concept with edits, or we can bring it on the 5th.
Historically, we updated it during our retreat and then we would vote on it at the next meeting. So I don't know if that's what people want to do.
Look it over at the retreat. Right. If you have edits, if you want to share them with me, I'll put the edits in before that, so we can look at it at the retreat.
Agenda item number 10, to appoint the assignments for school committee vice chair and subcommittees. And I think it's our procedural rules or policy that says that people are appointed by the chair. I personally think that people should choose what committees they have interests in or what their skills are in or things like that. I'm not comfortable appointing people because I don't want somebody to be stuck on a committee that they have no interest in. So I think it's more of people stating what committees they would like to be on more than being appointed. Member Hurd.
Did something get sent out about what the subcommittees are, what they are about? I mean, I didn't know if I just missed it, maybe because I was on the committee. This was my second term and I didn't want to be like, did I get this?
Jake started working on it and then ran out of time, and I started working on it, and then I realized that I don't know specifically like the full details of what like the finance committee does. So I couldn't write a full description for it, and I didn't know how frequently they met. So I put in what I knew and then bounced it back to him, and we don't, it's not complete. That's where we're at.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it if it did come out.
Yes.
They are listed in the rules.
Some of them are.
When I
Yeah.
read it, they are, at least they're listed, so you know which ones.
Yeah, because that's not a subcommittee, it's a state committee, but
So just, this could be another retreat item if you wish, but again, I would just say out loud. So we have negotiations, finance, curriculum, facilities, parent engagement, pathways, policy. And Chair Parks talked about adding dropout prevention as it's a required committee anyway. It's kind of fallen off that we'd like to get back going. So that would be one. But also note that you can make others, and we can talk about the frequency and whatnot. That's what we had started to do with what do these things do and what's the frequency in which they meet.
the commitment, yeah, remember Bowden?
Both line. You hear that? Thanks. So I'm fine with discussing and picking committees at the retreat. But I do want to kind of put out that I think it's important that that we find someone to join negotiations with me, because I'm the only one left and there really should be two school committee members. in negotiations, which are currently happening, and it's still the beginning stages. And so I think we meet Wednesday in 2 days. Oh, I'm sorry, the 31st. Okay, so next week. So I just think it's important that, if someone is able tonight to sort of raise their hand and say, I was thinking about it, I'm willing to join negotiations, and that way we could get you in, because they're currently happening and it's not like.
Does anyone have any specific interest in being involved in negotiations?
Anybody?
It is a pretty heavy commitment while the negotiations are going on. It's a heavy commitment, so just know that. Member Harriman?
I was thinking about it, but I would like to know more about the time commitment and the scheduling.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. And so whenever a contract opens up and we start negotiations, the very first meeting that we have, we go over ground rules, the type of negotiation that we want to do. If specifically, we're doing like an interest-based bargaining this time around with the teacher contracts. And we sit as a group and decide, 3 or 4 meetings out, what works for everybody. So right now, what works for us is Wednesday nights. And so, I could pull my calendar up and tell you that we have meetings scheduled the 31st, the 7th, the 14th, the 21st is a question.
And usually afternoon evening?
Yeah, they're afternoon, evening. They're typically like 3:30 or 5:30, and whatever works for the group is what we go with. And we're obviously trying to get through it as quick as possible. Specifically with the teacher contracts, we'd like to get through it before budget season starts. So we have that in place to bring to you guys, or to all of us. So the time commitment, it certainly is typically once a week at least, sometimes twice a week.
Not for the whole term. It's
not for the whole term, just until the contract, just until we can agree and get some signatures and move past it and stuff. But the way that we're doing it right now, it really is moving along smoothly with interest-based bargaining. And I believe that there are courses you can take. There are definitely YouTube videos you can watch on what it is and how it works. But also, if you were to join Scott, you come and you really don't have to say anything. You can just sit and listen. Like that's what I did my first round. I just sat back and I watched member Damon and member Whitlow just do their thing. So it really is a learning process when you're new. I'm still learning. I don't have a whole lot to say in the meetings, but they are fun and there's always food. So it's an incentive.
yes, member.
You'll do it?
We can have more than 2. We can have 3 people if you.
Yeah, I could do it. Wednesday evenings work for me up until the budget meetings that we're gonna have.
Yeah.
Right, yep. And Craig, that works for you too? Do we want to discuss other committees or do we want to leave it at that? Member Gallant?
I'm sorry. Curriculum, that sounds interesting.
And that has a daytime commitment. As you said, once a month, member Eames, that it's a whole day, no?
It's multiple. So there is an ongoing school. So are you here?
Yes.
There's an ongoing revision of the curriculum that the school takes on. And right now it's the math curriculum. Thank you, Sue. And that's 1 day a month, all day. And it's coming up.
Yeah, it really depends on the content area. The state rewrites its standards or updates its standards every 5 years, and then it's on us as a district to take those standards and sort of mesh them with our curriculum and make sure that we're teaching to the updated standards. So we've been looking at literacy, social studies, math, and those meetings, we'll be looking at visual and performing arts as well. Those are meetings where you have teachers as stakeholders coming together to look at the standards and help us make decisions about the right sort of vertical alignment of those standards and how it should be taught. And those are during the day because teachers are the stakeholders. But we also had some meetings that would happen prior to the school committee meetings just on topics of interest that school committee members might have. At one point, I think it was you, Megan, who asked about gifted and talented programming. And so we put together some information on that, and we just met as a small committee before this meeting just to provide that information to the committee.
What she said.
So you're still willing to,
And the commitment is one full day a month?
Plus whatever extra meetings,
meetings.
and that, right now, that's correct about math, but who knows about next year?
Well, I invited Paul and Elizabeth to join those committees to see how the curriculum is built. We don't generally have school committee members on those committees, but we were saying, hey, if you're available and you want to see how it is, we go about revising our standards and building a curriculum around those standards, then this is a great opportunity to see it from the ground up and learn about the standards, what we're actually teaching, and how we translate that into what happens in the classroom and how we assess our students.
Yes, I
Okay.
would be interested in that.
okay.
And yes, it is really interesting.
Member McLaughlin, did you have your hand raised?
Oh, actually, I think.
Okay, member Medina.
I'm interested in staying on the Pathways Committee. I'm also interested in dropout, but I kind of have a question about that. Like, I feel like they kind of go hand in hand. I don't know if like it can be, I don't know if it's something that can be combined, or, like efforts in one, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? But also another thing is I don't get out of work till 5, and a lot of the times they meet before. So I've missed some meetings due to that.
The dropout committee is required by the state legislature, and they have the parameters set. So there's like a long list of who needs to be included in the membership, including a student from the school that's identified as a student who might be impacted by potentially dropping out or has dropped out and returned, certain specific teachers, a school counselor. There's like, it designates who is supposed to be on that. And we had it consistently until the pandemic. And generally we met during the day at the high school because there was a student involved and things like that. I think Elizabeth and I had a conversation about how Pathways and that do have a lot of overlap, but I don't know if because it's a state regulated committee, if it can be blended. I don't know how that works.
I would agree, there's gonna be some overlap, but Pathways is talking about more than just high school, so I think it could still have purpose. It'd probably be good if someone is on both, so that the message could move with the school committee member.
I would be interested in both of those if possible.
Member McLaughlin.
Yeah, I would be most interested in the finance subcommittee, probably would be the most useful on that group, so.
Good.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a lot of other interest in it. Member Hurd.
Oh, great, yeah.
Thank you. So I am currently on the curriculum subcommittee, which unfortunately I'm not able to make those during the day meetings. And we haven't really met outside of that. So I am fine dropping off if anybody else would like to join. I'm really hoping we get our parent engagement subcommittee up and running this time. So definitely that. And then the Pathways Committee, if there's a available space. I don't know how many members are currently on that committee.
I was on it, but I didn't actually go to any.
We've been going, it's just that they actually haven't been able to make them because of the timing of it.
So I think this room.
Okay,
Right.
so that's what I would be
It'd be
interested
4
in.
or less, I think. Yep.
Okay.
Are you writing all these down? Because I haven't been. Okay. Okay, good.
And then also too, if there's, I was thinking about facilities, but my husband sometimes will chime in on things with Bill when it comes to like budget stuff and RFPs and stuff. So I didn't know if that was a conflict of interest or not, or how that works.
I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I think Greg's been pretty good about having ideas and just sharing them. So I think it's entirely up to you. I think that at this point, Greg and Bill have an open line of communication with each other. So
Bill might not want me to join facilities as I've come to him with, hey, what non-toxic products are we pulling into our schools? But if no one else wants to join facilities, because there's no one right now, right? Because it was Bruce and Linda.
Right.
Bruce has asked as a community member to stay engaged with that subcommittee
And negotiations.
and negotiations. So so long as the committee's okay with that, that would happen. But so yeah, it was it Were you on facilities? No, Bruce and Linda, yeah. Yeah, so. Pencil you.
Firm them up at the retreat.
I'll pencil you in. And in facilities, we often talk about things like something was out for bid and it's a big project and those kinds of conversations around how we're going about those facilities like things.
Like the science lab.
Like the science lab, which actually was discussed in facilities, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, you just said that you're okay. Member Eames.
Well, I would like to continue on policy. So Karen, if you don't mind writing that down, and curriculum if possible. And pathways, if there's room for me or if I needed, that's what I've been on and I'm happy with those. If it's too much.
I think you're
Okay.
Member Bowden.
Yeah, and since everyone else is saying it, I'll just say the three that I'm on are pathways, finance, and negotiations, and I'm happy to stay on all three of those.
Everyone except for me. Craig, you're in a negotiations, okay?
I wouldn't mind being on the facilities.
I would like to stay on policy. And then the only other two that I've been are the public health, which isn't a subcommittee, and the dropout is what I did in the past, dropout prevention.
So I added the wellness committee to the list, and that was just a last add, but it's in our policy that we have a wellness committee, and it is dictated that, I shouldn't say dictated, it is laid out in that policy, the members of that committee, and that does include a school committee member, and it talks about it talks about the school committee chair approving that. That committee is really, it's about healthy food choices, it's about instruction around wellness. It's about all of those pieces. So Megan is jumping up and down, so I'm gonna
I
guess
would like
that
to
she
nominate
wants
myself.
to be part of that.
Yes, public health is a city committee, but it requires a school department representative.
We didn't have this last year?
We've never had that.
So it's been in policy, we just haven't had the committee up and running. So the answer is no.
Member Medina.
You said it's like around food and stuff. Is it around like mindfulness, like the whole, like, all the things, you know what I mean? Okay, I wanna join that too, please.
I didn't know it was gonna get such a response. I would have mentioned it sooner.
She's all giddy now. You're gonna be saging the room as they walk in.
So we'll put the names to the piece of paper. I shared the document with you so that you could at least view it. So if you want to go through and look through them and think about what task you might have just signed up for, or that you might also be interested in doing. Different from last year, we're looking at scheduling a rotation of these meetings. If you have them all 1 week, it's a lot on us because they happen all at night a lot of times. So we'll get those together and again, talk about the retreat, make sure that we have the names in the right spots and we'll go from there.
I need to be reappointed to the public health meeting. As of January 2nd, I'm no longer technically a member because it termed. So the school committee has to appoint somebody and I would request that I be reappointed to the public health committee.
Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
I'd like to make a motion to reappoint you to the health committee
Thank you.
again.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And then I think you have to let city know.
I can let city know, and we also need to discuss vice
Oh,
chair.
yes. And that's in our procedural rules. It's written as a nomination and then a vote, because it used to be just a nomination, but there's a nomination and a vote now, right? I would like to nominate member Eames as the vice chair. if she's willing to accept.
I'm willing to accept if people accept me.
Member Heard?
Can I make is this where you make like multiple nominations or do we vote and then we nominate
The
again?
chair
Like,
makes
how-
the nomination and then the committee votes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not for the committee to nominate people?
No. Any other questions? So we just go to a vote then? Is there any public comment? Oh, yes, please.
Jay Rich, President of the Lewiston Education Association. I just wanted to say that there are two educators that are interested in being on the policy committee. And if I provided those names to Member Parks and was just curious if they were going to be, if they could be nominated tonight or if that's something that would happen at a different time.
So Chair Parks did share that with me. So there's really not a nomination procedure for that. But we will add those names and make sure they get circulated in.
So all in favor? Sorry, that's where we're at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. And opposed? 3. It passes 6-3. Agenda item number, is that everything on those?
Yes. Who seconded the public health?
The public,
Ashley.
no, I think that was number 8, wasn't it? For your nomination.
Nominate me,
You did and then you said. I
Yeah, that's-
Heard and Eames for public health.
Oh.
Yep. And then you got the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Agenda item number 11 is report from the school committee chair. Oops, I just cleared it. I had it set up on here and then I cleared it out. The main integrated youth, I have to read it to make sure I say it all right. Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. It's a survey that's done through of our students in grades 5 through 12, and it comes back with a report. So this is the 2023 report that just was released a couple weeks ago. It covers everything from students' feedback on tobacco use, alcohol use, substance use disorder that they might be exposed to or experiencing themselves, mental health, nutrition and food insecurity, physical health, all kinds of like the social determinants of health for our students in those grades. And normally we get Androscoggin specific data from this, but there wasn't enough participation in Androscoggin County. So we're part of the Western Maine aggregate. So it's not as specific to our local students as it usually is. But Corey Brown, who works for Healthy Androscoggin, is on the public health committee with me. And she's willing to come at a future time and give us a presentation on that so we can get a little bit more, a better sense of what's going on with our students in those age groups in regards to all of that information. And so that's kind of a future agenda item too. But I think that's really helpful information, and you can see the way things change over time with the results from year to year. And that's all I have for a report. Agenda item number 12 is a report from the superintendent.
Well, I had jotted down, obviously the labs and the roof, so we shared that. I think it's a fast moving time of year. Obviously getting to know each other in this group, getting to know some of the new membership of the city group. And we're right on the cusp of budget. The ED 279, which is a document that we'll walk through probably multiple times through the budget process, was released late last week. And so we have some preliminary numbers. Last year, it was a very sad day because it was down over $1 million, and this year it is not. So I want to get all the details to make sure I say it right before I go projecting it outwardly public, but we have a slight increase in state subsidy projected for next year. So that's a very different starting point than we had last year. And it's not a ton, but I want to make sure I have the metrics accurate before. And part of it, and I'll explain all this probably more than Karen wants me to. But part of it is just remember that the expanded programming in Auburn, that is the technical center, the CT programming, that's ours. That lands underneath our umbrella. But because there's additional programs, there's also additional subsidy. And so some of that might look like a big jump, but it's not. It's paying for something in place, but it wouldn't have been included because this is the first year of it being in existence. So the subsidy has I don't want to say a delay because that's the wrong term, but it may look like just more money, but it's being spent for other programming that lives in Auburn, but is overseen by us.
Member Bowden.
Can I just ask, I remember last year when you found out the number and it was down, there was some sort of discrepancy, if I remember correctly, and it was corrected. Is this number bigger than that? Or are you saying this number is bigger than the original number that was a discrepancy? I'm not asking for specifics. I'm just curious.
Well, no, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to misspeak about it, but the number is up from last year's fixed subsidy rate. But remember, last year's fixed subsidy rate hurt less, but still was down over $1 million. I think when it initially came out, it was like 2.6 and it ended up being, 1.2 or something to that effect. But this year it's at least in the positive.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. Have we heard anything about special ed and where that's going or?
So it's still in the works. The latest is that we believe that there'll be a rate set by the state instead of individual organizations picking what rate they have, but then tuitioned by the day, regardless of whether or not the student shows up. The big discrepancy for us, being a large district, if our kids were going to an outplaced school because of a really, really high level of need, we would pay when they attended. And the receiving school would be motivated to get kids there and provide the services. In this new model, they get paid every day, no matter what. So we've been budgeting a projection of kids who don't go to school every day. And then that shift, if the state lands where I think they're going to, would require us to pay tuition every single day, whether they're there or not. And they will set a rate which is expected to be higher than currently existing, but it could create a playing field of a cap so that you'd be able to budget more accurately, but an increase, more accurate budgeting. I will say probably forever that if we can continue to grow and develop the programs within, we will save all kinds of money and keep our kids at home, which is critically important for special ed. So we'll talk about that a lot coming up here. One other piece of update, we have met with all of our administration to talk about things that they're looking to have. We've done a really good job, I think, this year of making sure those ESER positions, as they became unfilled for whatever reason, if someone stepped away or something like that, we did not fill it because we knew that that's sunsetting. So that's a big chunk of money that actually Karen's did a lot of work with that to make sure that we're not backfilling positions that we can't maintain. So it's not perfect, but it's real good from a working perspective. That takes up most of the time right now.
Agenda item number 13 is report from our city council rep.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to report. At our last meeting, we also honored the mock trial champion team. We had a temporary caseworker in the general assistance office, and we bumped them up to a full-time permanent position because of the level of need there. And then just looking at our next meeting, that's tomorrow night, actually. We have a workshop with our state legislative delegation, and then a regular meeting at 7 o'clock, workshops at 6. And there isn't really anything that's school related. So but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. When he said legislative committee, it reminded me that we're also supposed to choose a legislative liaison and a parliamentarian, which we didn't do. We can do that at the retreat, but I just remembered now that we were supposed to do that also.
Good question.
Yes.
So Scott, I just have a quick question. I think it's agenda item number 9 for tomorrow night regarding stopping health inspections. Does that affect our schools?
I don't believe so, because it's food service establishments. I did read something in there that said that other institutions that are governed by another state department are not subject to the same rules. And I took that to probably mean schools and maybe
Hospitals.
jails and prisons and probably hospitals. So I don't know if our school cafeterias are inspected by the city inspector, but I'm guessing not.
So there is some crossover, but we certainly work with the state a lot, and so I don't anticipate it creating a change for schools.
Did you have a question?
Well, I was just thinking, I wasn't so thinking as much as our cafeteria, but like when LRTC opens up their nights where they serve food to the public and the public has to come pay, that's sort of like a restaurant style situation. So I didn't know if that fell under local, like our Lewiston State Health Inspector, because they're serving food that they're then getting paid for.
If which thing fell under that?
Public nights here.
LRTC, like when they charge for their like pasta nights or their, whatever.
Yeah, so this is a licensed facility, so it does have health inspections and all that.
City health inspections? or
Yes,
state?
city or state, who.
Probably city. Yeah, I'd have to double check, but so
So,
I don't want to dive too deep into this dynamic because I'm not a health inspector, but if a municipality provides the service, that's what you run with. And if they don't, you have other members of the field that will come visit. And so like for this facility, for example, the licensure responsibility is on the facility. And so to maintain it, you have to have inspections and things like that. So you would be requesting it. And so they get scheduled that way.
So Auburn doesn't have a local health inspector like we do. Does our Auburn food program, our do they have food open? Bleh, why can't I find words? Do they do the same thing that this one does?
So yeah, as a licensed facility, they would follow the local rules.
So they would get
because they
inspected
don't
at the
have
state
one,
level
they
only?
would
Okay,
probably access the state. Yeah.
okay, remember heard.
so Scott, can you ask that for us? Like, is LRTC subject to that? And if city council decides to get rid of our local health inspector, would that affect them being accredited or qualified or licensed or whatever that means for them? I mean, we obviously don't want to put them in a position where they would lose something like an accreditation or something like that because of that.
Yeah.
Sure, I can certainly ask that.
Oh, Scott, are you done? Your full report? Yes. Okay. Agenda item number 14 is report from subcommittees, which I don't think any have. Oh, have you met? Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say negotiations just continues to meet. I kind of said that earlier. We meet again on the 31st and we're kind of cruising along. So hopefully we can wrap it up before budget season.
Member Eames?
On Thursday, the Region 6, which is ours, MSBA meets, Maine School Board Association meets on Zoom to discuss some policies. So I was the legislative liaison in the past, also chair of policy in the past. So I was planning on attending on Thursday, even though I don't have any of these positions, these roles right
You're
now.
going to continue as you are.
Okay.
At least for policy
at least on
chair.
Thursday,
Yeah.
I will. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know
Thank
if
you.
anyone else wants to be the legislative liaison. Okay, we'll discuss that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked, because if someone else wants to, they can join on Thursday. I can forward the Zoom.
Is anyone else interested in attending it's the Western Maine region, right? For the statewide, they discuss upcoming policy changes that might be coming from the state level that could impact us. If anyone is interested in attending. Okay. Number 15 is school committee community announcements. Member Heard.
Thank you. So if you have children in school, you probably got a nice pink piece of paper that came home about the Public Theater's 26th annual Valentine Ball. It's on February 10th. And this year it's actually going to be at Cora Shrine. Last year it was at the Ramada. So you can buy tickets online. You can pay at the door. They usually have like a photo opportunity that you can pay for. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Is that for like
Yeah, so children and parents, so pricing is for one adult with a child is $45. Each additional child is $15. And then you can pay for like an 8x10 professional photo there. My daughter and my husband went last year and they had a blast, so it's fun.
Any other community announcements? Okay, future agenda items, Member Bowden.
Thank you. I guess I'll start by saying that I was very vocal when I first got on the school committee about reinstating midterms and finals at the high school level. And I was really pleased to see that Principal Radke went ahead and did that. And so I just went through a week of midterms with my high school age kids. I say I went through. They went through a week of midterms. And it really opened my eyes a little bit to I don't think we have a policy on that, on what midterms are, and a consistency between teachers as far as what they're putting on midterms. I suppose I assumed midterms were going to be an assessment to see what students have learned at this midpoint of the year. And while some teachers did that, some teachers did not do that. I encountered a lot of crying students this week, upperclassmen, top of their class, failing midterms because of, I don't know other way to say it other than gotcha questions. And it just seemed very inconsistent and it seemed cruel, especially for you've got some students really vying for that top 10 position and it's sealed after this first semester is done. And so it really bothered me. I had a hard week with midterms. I'm thrilled they're back, but I really think that we need some sort of policy in place for how teachers are administering them and the content of them. So I was hoping that could be something that we could look into doing. Thank you.
Member Eames.
Is that a curriculum committee, a policy committee, both? What would that be?
I think that's a school level thing more than anything, but
I think it's worth inviting Principal Radke in for a conversation about the consistency piece. I know Member Bowden and I talked about it last week. I heard similar things from multiple people, so definitely some concerns around a lack of consistency in what each class was doing, making students feel like they were at a disadvantage. So let me start a conversation with him, but I also wonder about, sometimes it's a delicate line, right, between what should be school committee policy and what should be building based, but I also am wondering if he would provide more input for what conversations he's had around the building. And there could be room that a policy is helpful to him in his enforcement of what I know he's shared with others, what his expectations were. So it may be worth it. We'll start a conversation.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. So I know I had asked a couple meetings ago about calendars and days and like how that works. And when Member Eames spoke today about the early release, and she said she was like a single parent, so trying to figure out those days off and stuff like that, that's tricky. But I also forgot, and it didn't like register until today. I met someone who was in Turner and they were like, we are off today because Lewiston is also off today. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. We have to have like the same amount of days with local districts. So if we can just get, again, I'm just asking for like an update, how that works, how that gets decided. I'm still concerned that we're out more than we're in. I've been talking to just some teachers, and I feel like maybe the general consensus from the ones that I've talked to is they're not able to get traction. So they start something and they're working on it, and then we have a day off, or then we have a half day, or then we have a this, or you know what I mean? So how do we as a district, but also with other local districts, navigate that and do what's best for our students and make sure they're getting out of the most of the only 100 and so odd days that, we have them.
Yeah, I think traction is always something we're trying to do, and having those full weeks is more so. just for context, we have to approve at some point a calendar, but it's regional. It's not just Lewiston. So we can't go rogue with our schedule because it's actually all the schools that attend LRTC. That's the region. So Lisbon, Oak Hill, Lewiston, Poland, Turner Leeds Green, 52, and Auburn. We can have no more than 5 dissimilar days in the entire calendar. So that's where it gets to be hard. So yes, that's why they're off. But there are other days that we have that we're in session that they're not, and that's considered dissimilar. And so that's part of that. That's part of the rules that exist. We also have districts that do things differently, and I don't know if Auburn does either late start or early release every week, which is more so than we do. We have some sprinkled in, but they do them at the whole district, right?
Every week, yeah.
Whole district every week for professional development teacher time. So there's a number of anomalies.
Been like a half day Wednesday from when I was a kid. It's always been like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of always, yeah.
I had to piggyback off that. So I know this is like a touchy subject, but I just want to bring it up because other districts in our area are offering remote days. And I know we don't offer remote days for snow days. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for those. Let's be a kid and play in the snow and make forts and like do those kinds of things. But I think it's maybe time to maybe potentially take a look at it where, I mean, if you look at the local districts in our area, most of them are offering some sort of remote day. And I understand maybe not a lot of learning is happening, and it kind of goes back to the whole homework thing, like students who are getting homework, maybe not the ones that will do it may not necessarily need it, and the ones that need it maybe aren't necessarily doing it. So, but I think it's about I would just like to have a conversation and see where everybody's at and like what everyone's thoughts are and how that would work, you know, as a district.
How would I can certainly bring that back as just a talking piece. Do you need me to do any research around what to bring to that conversation or just to have it as an open discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to hear what everyone has to say.
Okay.
Like I said, I just know and again, I see online, you know, like MSAD, you know, green regionally, we have other districts that are in that same group as us that we have the same calendar days, and most of them are offering some sort of remote day. So we're not going into July for school. I just want to like.
No, I have lots of thoughts. I just didn't know what you want to bring back. I think it's a good conversation to have though, for sure.
Member Medina?
I know that in one of the last couple of meetings we had, we got some feedback from teachers about how they think the new schedule is going with the flex periods and stuff. And I was just wondering if there's been any movement with hearing back from students. Personally, I know a few students that have tried to take advantage of that time, but there's a lot going on. Teachers trying to help multiple students. So it's not always the best it doesn't work best for everybody. So I just really want to hear from students themselves to see how they feel it's going and so we can see where to go from there.
So Jake and I met with our group of folks that are going to be our representatives here on the school committee. And we met with them last week, and that was actually one of the first things we brought up and we're talking about. So we meet with them again before our next meeting to have a deeper conversation, and I believe they will be ready to speak to that when they come to our next meeting. But they definitely had some strong feelings, and we have really great representation from different grade levels and all different students. So I think it'll be a good group for us to hear from.
And following up on that, I don't know if it's too early, but to see how that's impacting students who are on track for graduation, to see if our numbers look better than they did a year ago right now without that option. Anything else? Agenda item number 17 is to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.